Hey everybody, you are tuned in to Knucklebones Radio. This is Knucklebones himself. Welcome to the show. Tonight, I said I would pick up with William Cooper material. I'm going to go with Al Bielek. Al Bielek passed away in Mexico on October 10th, 2011 at age 84. So he won't be one of our conspiracy theorists that died suspiciously, I guess you would say. Anyway, the reason I pick Al Bielek is because last night I went with Phil Schneider, and this Al Bielek's material is related to Phil Schneider's material. So we're going to get going with that. And what I'm referencing to get the information is educate-yourself.org. So check that site out. I've been extracting information from this particular site. It used to be Ted Gunderson's site until he passed away. And there's plenty of information here. So I'll go with the different information on this site for a while and see what I find. And if you'd like to do research on your own, this is a good place to start. So, without any further delay, I'm going to give you a little background on Al Bielek and who he was, what he did, and we'll go from there. Much needs to be said of Al Bielek. I first heard him on the radio with Art Bell about 1995, which I think was a repeat broadcast from 94. During that 3-hour interview, I was amazed to hear the details of the Philadelphia experiment. I had only read one article about the Philadelphia experiment in Newsweek magazine somewhere around 1984, I believe, but I had no idea the incredible technology that was being employed or the eventual consequences that humanity would have to pay for the folly of that experiment. Since it ripped open a hole in the space-time continuum that allowed unwelcome and unenlightened aliens to literally pour into our galaxy. There already exist many articles about Al Bielek on the internet, and I will repost some of those articles here. I hope to add new material based on a 4-part video autobiography that Al made about his life story in April of 2000 in Colorado. I will also cover new info from a 4-hour talk that Al gave at a private home in Laguna Hills, California on February 17th, 2001, along with the insights gained from many conversations with Al over the phone. Al is featured on a CD produced in October 2000, which covers his life as Al Bielek, Edward A. Cameron, the Philadelphia Experiment, the Montauk Project, Mind Control, and Time Travel. Prior to the conversations with Al, I was already familiar with some of his earlier videos made at various expos, including a very informative video on mind control made in 1992 with Vladimir Terziski. Most of the material on the Terziski videos has not appeared in text form on the internet. Al also laid out the details of the Philadelphia experiment in a book, The Philadelphia Experiment and Other UFO Conspiracies, co-authored with Brad Steger, in 1990. Lost Memories. In 1988, Al Bielek started to recover fragmented memories of his involvement in the Philadelphia experiment after seeing a late-night TV airing of the 1984 movie Philadelphia Experiment. Because of Al's involvement with the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk Project, and other secret black budget programs, he'd been subjected to mind control, as have all personnel connected with such projects. With the goal of eliminating his conscious mind all memories of his involvement in the black projects, memories can be created, changed, or wiped completely when you are subject to mind control. Does that mean Al's information may not be 100% accurate? Perhaps, but I feel strongly that the overwhelming bulk of information that Al Bielek has relayed over the years is true and has occurred as he has stated it. It looks like we have a phone call right here in the middle of this, so I'll go ahead and pick up the phone call and we'll go from there. Great Babe, you're on the air, buddy. How's it going?
Not much, man. I was just calling to tune in, man.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll leave you on the line if you want to chime in. Feel free. I'm doing Al Bielek. It has to do with UFOs and things like that. So it's just going along with I did it in the beginning of the week.
Okay, I missed the beginning of the week. Just go ahead and I have any questions. I hit a button.
All right, buddy. You're unmuted, and you can just speak when you want.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have myself muted, and so but I got you. Go ahead. I'm in here with you.
All right, buddy. Okay, so let me pick up where I left off here. In 1988, Al Bielek started to recover fragmented memories of his involvement in the Philadelphia experiment after seeing a late-night TV airing of the 1984 movie, The Philadelphia Experiment. Because of Al's involvement in that experiment, the Montauk Project, and other secret black budget programs, he had been subjected to mind control, as have all personnel connected with such projects, with the goal of eliminating from his conscious mind all memories of involvement in the black projects. Memories can be created, changed, or wiped completely when you are subjected to mind control. Does that mean Al's information will not be 100% accurate? Perhaps, but I feel strongly that the overwhelming bulk of information that Al Bielek has relayed over the years is true and has occurred as he has stated it. It's always possible that selected memories could have been distorted or even inserted into Al's subconscious mind for disinformation purposes. But to dismiss his remarkable revelations out of hand is foolish. Al had discovered that if both hemispheres of the brain are in balance or in sync, then mind control access or manipulation by mind control programmers is thwarted. He explains in his autobiography videos some methods for balancing the left brain and the right brain to achieve this balanced state. Al Bielek and Phil Schneider, who is the man I covered yesterday. Phil Schneider, just a little background on him. He was a geologist, an engineer, a miner, responsible for, I believe it was 15 different secret military underground bases. He claimed to be attacked by alien grays that the government didn't tell anyone about. Approximately 60 or 70 black berets and other military people were killed, and he survived it thanks to one of the black berets or green berets that were there with him. Anyway, I did that material yesterday. We'll move on with his cohort or somebody he was in contact with, Al Bielek, and a lot of the same information. Al Bielek and Phil Schneider have been two of the very best sources who have had to reveal highly secret information about the black projects of the American government. People have often asked Al why he hasn't been killed if his information is so good. Phil Schneider, by the way, was killed with a piano wire in his house back in, I think it was 95 when he was killed. So anyway, just throw that in there. He tells them that he and brother Duncan have something of a protected status because their bodies are locked in with the time experiments of Montauk, and that the Earth needs to complete a biorhythm stabilization cycle that converges on August 12, 2003. So whatever happened there has already happened, and apparently he didn't make it back. Anyway, according to Al, the stabilization is somehow locked in with AI and Duncan's bodies. Not AI, but Al and Duncan's bodies. Al already found out that he cannot and will not be arrested by police when he was taken into custody after being discovered on a clandestine and unauthorized inspection of the Montauk base in the early 1990s. One of the more compelling revelations from Al's private talk in Laguna Hills and from his 8-hour video autobiography is the reference to being teleported to the year 2137. Now, this stuff's way out of here. I'm not saying I agree with it. People being teleported and time travel and UFOs themselves. I'm not saying whether I believe it or I don't believe it. I'm just going over this guy's work. You know, he was a radio host. He was involved in these different projects. And only he knows whether he's telling a story or not. So, you know, just bear with me. We'll go through the story and then we can judge whether you think this is something that's gone on and is going on right now or is just complete nonsense. After jumping off the Navy ship Eldridge on August 12, 1943 with his brother Duncan Cameron, as the Philadelphia experiment began to spiral out of control on board ship, Al and his brother found themselves in a future hospital in the year 2137. Hospital personnel and other people with whom he spoke told Al of the great changes and cataclysmic events that occurred in the opening years of the 21st century. The life of Al Bielek. Al Bielek was born in 1927. His earliest memories as Al Bielek began at the age of 9 months old, when he clearly remembers sitting in a basset, not a basket, but a bassette, which was placed on top of the piano during the family's Christmas party. He recalls that he could fully understand the conversation that was taking place around the piano. When Al attended grade school, he was known to his classmates as the walking encyclopedia, much like me when I was young. No, that's not true. He had an opportunity to take an electronics test before graduating high school, and he was the only person to pass the test. The Navy was interested in young men with electronic aptitude and recruited Al as a contractor during the end of the Second World War. Al took on various vocations in the field of electronics. While contracting for various military contractors, the people who worked with him began to reveal the truth about the U.S. government's involvement with extraterrestrials and PSI ops, psychic operation programs. Strange things started to happen to Al soon afterwards. While in Hawaii in 1956, he had a brief encounter with a man who he believes now to be Mark Hamill, the actor in Star Wars movies. So this is getting more far out than I expected, but let's continue on. I do trust the source. The source of this material on this website was the head of the Los Angeles FBI in the late 70s. His name was Ted Gunderson. He's been on Alex Jones. He's been all over the internet. I see no reason for people that old in that position to lie. So let's just go with it and see what we get out of Al Bielek's information. So anyway, he met the actor in the Star Wars movie. Some years later, he was recruited into the Montauk Project, which was developed in a multi-level underground facility beneath Fort Hero near Montauk, Long Island, New York. During his Montauk work, he would work on his normal day job in California and take a highly classified, high-speed, deep-tunneled, underground magnetic levitation subway train from Los Angeles to Montauk, Long Island in about 2 hours. To carry out his duties at Montauk and take the same 2-hour subway 8-way ride back to Los Angeles by early morning. So supposedly way back when here in about 1940 or so, 1956 or so, he was able to go from LA to Long Island in approximately 2 hours and come back that same day in 2 hours. After the time tunnel was perfected at Montauk, he would simply be teleported to the Fort Hero Long Island Underground Base and return back to his apartment in California using Montauk's time tunnel machine. During the 1970s, Al was a program director for the group of psychics who manned the infamous Montauk chair. Since the Montauk Boys were a key program at Montauk, Al had some influence with the Montauk Boys program as well. His duties were to handle the operations of the mind control system. He was in regular contact with Duncan Cameron and Preston Nichols. Stuart Swerdlow was one of the Montauk Boy programmers under Al Bielek. In the 1980s, when the time control experiment was fully operational, Al participated in some of the time travel experiments. Both he and Duncan used the Montauk time travel to travel to Mars on several occasions. I almost feel foolish saying this because it's hard for me to believe that some of this went on, but we will continue. Both of these men were patriots, pioneers of New World Order information, and I feel obligated to go through the whole story before I pass judgment. And now I can see why some people were skeptical of Phil Schneider with his killing of the alien Greys, and now we have this person who is associated with him, Al Bielek, talking about time travel and, meeting future Star Wars actors and so on. So anyway, in the 1980s, when the time control equipment was fully operational, Al participated in some of the time travel experiments. Both he and Duncan used the Montauk time travel to travel to Mars on several occasions. He now remembers several of the trips he took with special teams to, 1, a research station in the year 100,000 BC. That's BC. 2, to other planets to get canisters filled with latent dark energy. And 3, to future time periods, sometimes thousands of years in advance of our. So let's return to the very bizarre Al Bielek story. Kind of goes along with Phil Schneider. They're both UFO types, and they're connected in some way. That's where I got the name from researching Al Bielek. Phil Schneider. So anyway, in January 1988, after seeing the movie The Philadelphia Experiment, his memories of participation in the August 1944 Philadelphia Experiment started to return. Al believes his involvement with Montauk ended with that memory recovery. Over time and through meetings with Preston Nichols, Duncan Cameron, and others, many more memories have since returned. Ironically, just after his memories returned, Dr. John Van Neumann, a leading player in the Philadelphia Experiment and the Montauk Project, attempted to get in touch with Al. A promise he made to Ed Cameron, should Al ever begin to recover his memories of participation in the Philadelphia Experiment. Al made the decision to go public with the information about his involvement at Montauk and Philadelphia Experiment in 1989. He has been a profile speaker on radio talk shows and at conferences. He believes that he has not been harmed or stopped because his time-traveling experiments have locked him into this timeline. Somehow, by being here today, he, among others in the Montauk program, served to balance the time-warping imbalance efforts they produce from prior time travel experiments. During these taped interviews, Al Bielek said he received information that up to 2 million people, 2 million children, are missing each year. This corroborates with estimates made by Ted Gunderson, that's the FBI agent I mentioned, that this material comes from. It's Ted Gunderson's website. It's Ted Gunderson's information. Ted Gunderson was the head of the FBI in Los Angeles, late 70s. I don't know. I don't know why he would put out this information if there wasn't something to it. So this is why I carry on, because after the time travel and the subway that was way ahead of its time, still ahead of its time, you know, it's a little much to take, but this is Ted Gunderson material. He also passed away last year, so I have to go with it. He's an FBI guy. I've seen many of his videos. I've seen, you know, his website here, and up until this particular story, I was buying most of what he was selling. He said how the government kept him from digging deeper into Oklahoma City, and I believe Ruby Ridge, I believe Waco. He had investigated those to see what the government's involvement might have been in each of those situations, and he was digging up a lot of information maybe they didn't want him to have. This story here, who knows? It could be some kind of disinfo that somebody threw on his website. I have no idea. I can only, you know, you can only dig so deep. There's only so much information out there about these different patriots or conspiracy people, pioneers of the conspiracy movement. All these guys I'm naming, Bielek, Gunderson, Schneider, you know, they're right there with Alex Jones or William Cooper or one of those people. So, you know, I'm going to take it and put the story out. Like I said, I have some doubts about this story just because it's so far out there. It's hard for me to believe it. Some other things like the mind control programs, I can buy into that. So anyway, this corroborates with estimates made by Ted Gunderson and others that many children are being snatched by government agents and others. See the story called The Finders. The Finders. Search that on Google. It's a pretty bizarre story. I know quite a bit about that. I've done shows on it before. It's about the Finders group helps supposedly find lost children and return them to their parents, but the children never quite make it, and they end up being used for rituals and satanic things and pornography and so on. So it's not a great story. I believe it also included Larry King and that situation there, if you recall that, with the White House and supposed children being brought there, and a true story about that particular part of it. So you'll have to ride along with me and decide what parts of this you want to believe and what parts you don't. Okay. So children are being snatched by government agents and others for secret government uses in the mind control programs, underground slave labor for aliens, satanic ritual and abuse or murder, slavery and prostitution, and other black op programs. One man who took the time to investigate found there is a total of 1.4 million children reported missing in the United States. California alone had 110,332 missing children. All right. That part there is to be continued. We can talk about that some other day. I can go into the finders and that part of it. We're going to continue here. The brief biography of Al Bielek is a compilation of notes, including in the CD about Al's life, and my own notes gathered from lectures and tapes. This summary is a quick overview to give the reader unfamiliar with Al's life a chance to get a handle on some of the more astonishing elements in Al Bielek's story. Not that what we've read so far wasn't kind of astonishing, but I guess, wait, there's more. Greater detail of Al's history is now available in his own words on audio and video recordings, of which I'll tell you more later. The information that Al has acquired in the course of his time travels and secret government projects in which great relevance and importance to not only Americans, but everyone living on this planet. I only hope that the posting of this information on the site will help and establish a wider audience for his amazingly detailed recollections of past events, but also for sobering revelation of coming events, especially in the years 2003 to 2005. Now, I don't recall anything in particular happened in those years, but I guess I should dig a little deeper, or maybe it's just off for a few years. Maybe it's coming up this year. Anyway, the most difficult part of Al's story for the newcomer to accept is that Al Bielek retains all the lifetime memories starting from babyhood of another man. That other man is named Edward A. Cameron. Ed Cameron, along with his brother Duncan Cameron, were first-hand participants in the Philadelphia experiment of 1943. The idea of a separate consciousness inhabiting, or at least temporarily, someone else's body is a well-known phenomenon, as in the case of when a channeler or a medium brings in a spirit to speak through him, or the person is possessed by a demonic spirit. It is also possible for a spirit or consciousness to transfer into a body, a different body, during a single life. So they're saying you can go from one person to another, your spirit, in the same life. That's pretty far out there. This is essentially what occurred to Al Bielek. When the consciousness of Ed Cameron was transferred into the body of one-year-old Alfred Bielek in 1927, if you are familiar with the many books written by T. Lobsang Rampa, which I'm not, you know that the author of these extraordinary books was the consciousness of a Tibetan monk whose body was destroyed at the hands of Chinese captors in the 1950s. On the astral plane, a deal was struck between Rampa and the soul of a rather ordinary Englishman. The spirit of the Englishman wished to return to the spirit world, and Rampa wanted to inhabit a body again in order to make his story known to humanity. Some people refer to this exchange as a walk-in. I won't attempt to go into the details here, but the reader will better understand some of the references made in my brief bio if you bear the above explanation in mind. According to Al, alien technology was made available to government and non-government groups, which has the capability of taking a living human being and an age regress that person backwards in time to any desired age. This assertion concerning age regression technology has recently been corroborated in a new online book written by Stephanie and Michael Ralph called The Mars Record. Michael Ralph had recovered memories of working for the Navy on Mars for 20 years and being age regressed back by 20 years and reinserted into the Earth time continuum at the point in time in which he was taken to Mars to begin his tour of duty there. In 1991, an interview took place in Yan, Washington, between Al Bielek and unnamed reporters working for the Sovereign Scribe of McKenna, Washington. Al recounts how he and his brother Duncan were transported by a time tunnel machine located at Montauk, Long Island, in the interior of an underground facility on Mars in the late 1970s. The United States, possibly Russia, and certain aliens already had bases established on the surface of Mars in 1969, in keeping with the provisions of an agreement between the aliens and the U.S. called Alternative 3. The U.S. personnel on the ground, however, could not gain access to these interior Martian facilities because they lacked the heavy equipment needed to force an entry. Possessing advanced computers and exact positioning coordinates for Mars, the space-time tunnel machine set up at Montauk could place Al and his brother on any location on or inside the planet to within a few inches of computer coordinates. Al and Duncan made many authorized trips to Mars in the time tunnel and 2 unauthorized trips on their own, in which they later discovered and taken off the Mars Time Tunnel project. 1997 interview with Al Bielek. Kenneth Burke of Leading Edge newspaper interviewed Al Bielek in Global Sciences Congress, Daytona Beach, Florida in 1997. A highly revealing interview covers many important topics. Now I'm going to get to this 91 interview and the 97 interview, and then a 92 video. I'm going to talk about them. Al Bielek made at least, this is the 92 video on mind control with Vladimir Terziski. Al Bielek made at least 2 underground videos with Vladimir Terziski. The first one covered the Philadelphia experiment in depth, and the second video went into the mind control aspects of the Montauk project, which included both trauma-based mind control of the Montauk boys and the development of microwave electronic mind control that is now being implemented worldwide. Now some of this I feel like is the truth with these microwave electronic mind control. That sounds like something they could pull off. Just the time travel's a bit much for me to handle. Maybe even the UFOs. I've never seen one, but I have seen them on TV recently in the news, as I referenced in previous shows. I saw it on Fox News, the beam of light coming down to Jerusalem where the Temple of the Mount is, or came down, and I remember Kelly, can't think of her last name, but she's a host on Fox. Yeah, Megan Kelly. She's like, is he back? You know, like I don't like seeing things that scare me. You know, is Jesus back? Because that's what it appeared to be signifying. So, I mean, who knows? You know, and I seen that within the last year on Fox News. And that's no lie. You could probably find it somewhere in their archives, if they have archives. I'm sure you could probably find something about it, or on YouTube or whatever. So search Fox News, aliens, or Jerusalem aliens, or something like that. Maybe you'll come up with that video. Anyway, this microwave electronic mind control that is now being implemented worldwide. You can read a brief summary of the video on the products page by clicking the above link. Once again, I gave you the website I'm on. All of this material, videos, books, whatever, you should be able to find on the site itself. It's called educate-yourself.org. I put it in the chat room when I begun the show. All you need to do is scroll up. If it's not there, scroll up the chat and you will see all the links I put up there. All right, now I'm going to do this 1991 interview with Al Bielek, the man we've been talking about for the last hour. This 1991 interview took place in Yelm, Washington, between Al Bielek and unnamed reporters working for the Sovereign Scribe of McKenna, Washington. Al recounts how he and his brother Duncan were transported by a time tunnel machine located at Montauk, Long Island, into the interior of an underground facility on Mars in the late 1970s. The United States, possibly Russia, and certain aliens already had bases established on the surface of Mars in 1969 in keeping with the provisions of an agreement between the aliens and the U.S. called Alternative 3. The U.S. personnel on the ground, however, could not gain access to these interior Martian facilities because they lacked the heavy equipment needed to force an entry. Possessing advanced computers and exact positioning of coordinates for Mars, the time-space-time tunnel machine set up at Montauk could place Al and his brother at any location inside the planet to within a few inches of the computer coordinates. Al and Duncan made a number of authorized trips to Mars with the time tunnel and 2 unauthorized trips on their own, which they were later discovered and taken off the Mars Tunnel project. Al Bielek, noted lecturer on the famous Philadelphia experiment and time travel mind control experiments of the Montauk Project, recently spoke with the tribe interview team in Yelm, Washington. Bielek gave us an update on the current use of mind control and psychic warfare, and also offered a more detailed account of his experiment in the Montauk Project. Montauk, also known as Phoenix Project, used Bielek and his brother Dustin Cameron to explore the underground cities of Mars. So here's the interview. I'm going to ask and answer the questions so you know what's going on. Regarding your experience on Mars, you walk through the time tunnel. You take a step and you're on Mars. What did you see? Well, I was not on the surface of Mars. We were in the underground. The story goes back to the Alternative 3 book, the TV production in England outlining the fact that we do have Mars bases, one or more, provided by a joint operation with the U.S. government. I do not know if the Russians are in on it, and aliens. They are they are on the surface spaces, not starface, but surface spaces. It's a world government operation, really. That's not strictly the United States government. After they were on the surface, which was about 1969, they found that there were entrances to the underground sealed, and they knew something was down there. The rumors were that it probably artifacts from an ancient civilization buried underground because there was lots of remains above ground. Ruined cities that have been there, by NASA's estimates, maybe 300,000 years. 250,000 years. 300 to 50,000, right in that ballpark. But they found the entrances all blocked, all scaled off to any underground areas, so the word went back to communications in the late 1970s to whomever back at the Montauk and Phoenix Project could do anything about this for us. We can't get into the underground of Mars. They said, yes, I think we can. Give us some coordinates on the surface of the planet. We'll have to run astronomical computation, which they did, and plug these into a computer. They wanted 2 people to go, and it happened to be Duncan and myself. Why 2? Why 2 people? To corroborate what the other one saw, and also in case there was any problems in the underground. They really didn't know it was down there. So they sent us, and we went up there to the underground using Montauk Time Space Tunnel device developed as a result of the Philadelphia experiment. See Scribe issues 9, 13, and 14. There was a problem with light. We had to take lighting with us at the time. Later on, if I remember, we found some of their light sources and turned those on. We found eventually that the last remnants of the Martians, if you want to call them that, died in the underground between 10 and 20,000 years ago by estimate, and they left everything they had of their civilization underground. We found enormous amounts of statuary which appeared to be religious. What did they look like? How big were they? Typically, a so-called Martian was 6, 7, or 8 feet tall, stone, gems embedded in them, and so forth. So they were 6, 7, 8 feet tall, looked like stone, and they had gems embedded in them. Sort of like a stone Marilyn Manson. All right. These were of human-like people. Yes, they were quite well preserved. We found archives. We found a lot of scientific equipment. We found electronic equipment down there, tons and tons of stuff. And the rumor was also later that I didn't recall until Duncan reminded me of it about a week ago. He said, don't forget the 17,000 metric tons of Martian gold they took out. It was worth an unbelievable fortune. Where it went, we have no idea, but it was returned to Montauk, and from there it went somewhere. There were several authorized trips. And Duncan and I got the bright idea, since everything was in the computer, let's take a trip or 2 on our own, do our own exploring. So we did. After the second one, it was found out and we were stopped. That was when we got into the archives and found the enormous records of the civilization which was buried down there. What did you find out? He, as the one that read them, I couldn't read them. He didn't tell you? No. Well, at the time, he did at the time, but he can't remember any of it now. It's a very strange memory. On again, off again. And that part of it was never made clear to me as to what he really found. Right after that, we were removed. But I do remember some of the other installations we saw down there. They had very odd, large generators of some type. If you did not see it, I recommend that you go to the movie Total Recall. In fact, it was seeing that movie that reminded me of the fact that I had been there. Not the colonies, but the shots of the underground, where they showed these large round canisters, where the director said they were probably for oxygen generation. I'm not quite sure what we think, so I looked at them and they said they're not round, they're hexagonal. And I asked myself, how the hell did I know that? So that was our view of Mars from underground. We didn't see hardly a thing of it from the surface. Did you see the ice under the surface like in Total Recall? Ice? No. If I remember that movie, that's where they melted a lot of ice to create the atmosphere. There was not ice under there. There were oxygen generators, and they also had some storage. There was a generating system which apparently the ancients had left. I don't know how much about it. I don't really know much about it, but it was activated before they moved the surface colonies in. They also melted down the polar caps. The rumors are that they used a hydrogen bomb or two for that. I don't know if that's true, but they did melt down a lot of the polar ice, so they would have some water. It's still sparse, but they have it. The atmosphere is thin, but they do have atmosphere. And the temperature is warm enough. In the equatorial region, they have no problem surviving. It runs about 50 degrees, and of course, the astronomers have known this about 50 years or more. It's quite livable in terms of temperature. So we're getting into the interview here, and we have a few people still listening, or I probably would have bailed out by now. I guess I got a hand there, just to be a trooper. Be that as it may, I'm sticking you with one more song before I continue. The voice is just really tore up tonight. I guess too many days in a row of doing radio after not being on here forever have finally caught up to me. So I'm going to play something here, and then we will get back to the rest of this interview. Hopefully it's semi-interesting to people. If not, it'll be a good, not fictional story for you to listen to. Whatever you feel about it. If you believe in aliens, I don't want to insult you there. I'm a little skeptical about it. Whether or not we've been to Mars, I'm more open to that being true. But time travel, things like that, I guess it's possible. I guess it's possible, but I just having a tough time buying it myself. So it's hard for me to sell what I can't convince myself is true. But I'll just tell the story, and you guys can make up your own mind. That's all I'll say about it. Yeah, this has been a tough show for me to get through tonight, but we're going to keep trucking, see how far I can get. At least try to finish the rest of this interview with Al Bielek in 1991. The material is just, I guess it isn't that hard to believe that they got to Mars. Just the time tunnel thing is it's a little tough to believe for even me, the probably, number one conspiracy theorist out there. That would be me. This stuff is pretty, it's just pretty far out. Anyway, let's continue the interview. Al Bielek and the Washington newspaper, what was it called? Let me find it here. The Sovereign Scribe of McKenna, Washington, did the interview, and I am playing both parts here, Al Bielek and the newspaper. So let's continue it. Let me find my place, and we'll continue the interview with Al Bielek here. Yeah, still not finding it. Okay, here we go. Picking up where I left off, the Sovereign Scribe asks, the lighting that you mentioned, what was that like? So there was lighting in the underground base or whatever up there in Mars. Unknown form of illumination. After we found out how to turn it on, some of the power generators are still working. After we turned on the underground lighting, we had no lack of light. Otherwise, we had to carry our own, and portable lighting was not all that effective because we are dealing with larger underground chambers, several hundred feet across, high ceiling, and portable lights are not very good for a large chamber like that was. Eventually we found where they had their own lighting. It was very bright. Have you any information on the face of Mars? Not that I remember in the underground. There was more than one face on Mars, by the way. We found several. But I remember the NASA announcement some years ago, about 2 years ago, that they're receiving a low-frequency radio transmission from Mars. It was about 50 kilohertz, if I remember correctly. Quite a low level, indicating the equipment or whatever it was that was generating the RF signal, and it was coded, and quite old and probably nearly worn out. So they were amazed there was anything still coming out of it, but it was enough of a signal they could pick it up and put it through the computer and transcribe it. It was a warning message to humans not to repeat the mistakes they made. This almost seems, you know what I mean? It almost seems like a movie to me rather than something that actually happened to somebody. It seems like, you know, you were time traveling, all right, I want some of what you're having, kind of deal. But anyway, let's continue. Do you have any feelings about being on Mars? What are your general impressions? We were digging the remains of an old civilization that preceded ours, and it felt very peculiar. To look at what was left in a once great civilization and realize they literally died there and left everything behind, and that eventually the thing shut down. It was in the underground deliberately, apparently was survival, because the circle cities had long since been destroyed, and they lived down there and stayed there. From what I understand of it, a number of Martians survived whatever the attack was on the surface, eventually took off for Earth, and others decided to stay behind on Mars in the underground. Quite literally, their progeny eventually died out, and the whole race that was left behind on Mars died out. It's a rather strange feeling to realize the remnants of a race died out in the underground totally. They just left all their hardware behind. In Rod Steiger's book, he spoke of March 18th, 1990 as being important dates in the history of the Psi Corps. That's during these dates their equipment was zapped and all the psychics re-signed March 20th. Can you explain all this? The psychics resigned, not resigned, but they all resigned on March 20th, the day after, 2 days after this happened. Al Bielek says, well, basically what happened was a very strange story, as the one I'm telling right now. In January 1990, Psi Corps received some new hardware because NSA had been working on this for years. Sonic-type hardware that boosts the mind and capabilities of people who already have a great deal of capability. It becomes quite formidable. They found themselves, after infusion of new equipment, after learning how to use it, with the capability of locating a picture buried in someone's files anywhere, or tracking a missing file or missing information that they had instructions to recover or locate. They didn't do the recovery, they merely located it. And how we found out about this is a very interesting story. Back in November of 1989, Duncan told me, he said that I would have the proof of the Philadelphia experiment in my hands during March of 1990. Well, it seems like during that weekend, that particular Sunday, preceding the walkout, I was in Phoenix. I was out for lunch that Sunday, and a phone message was waiting for me that Preston had called, and he was in a panic. When I finally got him on the phone, it was already too late. He told me that a person had visited him. You see, His father had been a senior scientist in the Navy working on the Philadelphia Project, and that before the scientist died, he told his son what had happened, that he had certain files and that he was turning them over to his son, but he advised his son not to ever tell anyone about it. So this guy, identified to me, never told anyone about what he had. 1 week prior to the visitation with Preston, he gets a knock on the door. It's government agents. We want to search your house. Well, what for? Get out of our way. And then they start tearing his house apart. He knew what they were looking for. He didn't have it there, but he said, I don't know what you're looking for. And they didn't find it. It took several days, and it's a good thing they didn't find it. It wasn't there, right? Okay, anyway. It took several days, and he shipped them. He went and got his stash of files, which contained 2 rolls of film of Rainbow 3 and Rainbow 4, which were the 2 Eldritch tests, plus a stack of papers, still highly classified apparently from what Preston said, because they wound up in Preston's hands. So he started calling his friends to see who could take care of this and take it off his hands, because the government agents were right behind him, in about 2 hours right behind him, trailing him. None of his friends would touch it, those that he got through to. And finally he got to the end of a long list of people, and Preston Nichols was at the bottom of the list. He called Preston, and Preston was home. He said, I'm coming over to give you something. Well, what's this about? Said Preston. I'll be there at such and such a time. He goes over and hands him the file and the film and tells him the story about his father and the government agents and so forth. Preston says, well, what am I going to do with it? He says, I don't know. It's your problem now. The government agents are about 2 hours behind me. He takes Preston's out and shows him his car with bullet holes in the door, and he says, I'm getting out of here, and he left. Preston, in a panic, tried to get a hold of anybody he knew that day, including myself. I was not reachable. Duncan, previous in the morning, got wind of something due to his psychic sensitivity. Something very heavy coming down. He took off from Preston's, went home, went into his bedroom, locked the door, crawled under the bed sheets until about 5 in the afternoon. This is a fact. He panicked. He would not even answer the phone. He shut off his answering machine. So this comes down. Preston can't get a hold of me. Finally, when he did get through, I called him. He said, well, I called up NSA and told them that I had very hot material here that I don't want. They asked, what is it? And I told them. They said, well, we don't want it. He says, I've got to get rid of this stuff. It's black card clearance level. So he said, all right, we'll send some FBI agents to pick it up. So they eventually arrived and turned it over, and he turned it over to them, verifying that they were FBI. He got rid of the whole business. Then after I called that, and I still haven't forgiven him for it, but the interesting connection to get to your question about the Psycorps is that we finally put together the fact that the new equipment, they were able to identify a photograph if it's in somebody's file, and apparently they have standing orders to find my information, any information, whatever, dealing with the Philadelphia experiment, and make damn sure I didn't get it. And if they spotted something and found out who this guy was, and they sent out the government agents, and this whole story ensued about this man whose father was a senior scientist, and we don't know what happened to it. We never saw it again. In any case, the next day, from information I had, there was a big rumble in the Psycorps. And they were warned by somebody on the outside who was a little friendly to us to get the blazes out of there. That all your installations are going to be melted down, literally. And they were warned to get out. All of them walked out except 10 who were brand new recruits who had been told to defend the machines with their lives, and they did, literally. They died, the rest walked out of the government service and disappeared. There was a panic meeting with the president. Who melted the equipment down? Alien, there's none. Let us put it this way. Extraterrestrials. Do you know who they are? Yes, but I will not say. Are these the same ETs that Preston said melted down the buzzsaw antenna at MacArthur Airport around this Thanksgiving weekend last year? Al Bielek says, yes, basically they took care of 4 sites in the United States. 1 at Fort Meade, and there were 3 other locations. I believe 1 was Atlanta, another in New Orleans, and 1 somewhere in the West. Every one of them walked out and disappeared. Their locations were melted down. The president had a panic, practically apoplexy, tried to call back the old director who was in retirement. He said it was an emergency, we need to talk with you. So he came down to talk to them. I'll only give this man's first name. It's Email, or ML, not email, but ML. He was already 90 years old, and they told him the problem. He said, I'll look at that, but I won't give you my answer for about 3 days. I'll tell you then whether or not I'll come back and reorganize this whole operation for you. In the meantime, they contacted NASA to try to get NASA to give up their psychic agents, not Psycorps, who are trained for a different mission and are not trained in pairs but individually. NASA told them to go shave it and got away with it. They said, we're not trained to do the work you're doing. You can't have our people. So finally on the following Friday, Emil came back to the president and said, my answer is no. There's no way I'll come back and do anything for you. You're in deep trouble as it is, and you're going to be a lot deeper trouble in about 30 days. As he packed up and left, I presume that this was the last we'd seen of him in those quarters. But the Psycorps remained dissolved until they tried to recruit new people, and they did pick up a few, but nothing like what they had before, because it takes 4 years now to train them. It used to be 5. So they're building it back up again. They've been trying to build it back up. They've been building, then before the beginning of the so-called Mideast War with Iraq, they made a deal as part of the situation building up to the declaration of war, wherein we got all the backing of a British European nations with the exception of Germany. They went down to them as part of the deal and asked the British and French and Russian governments, who all had their own Psycorps, if they would loan, again, members to the U.S. government for their operations. And they did. They got transfers and built up the whole organization to the organizational strength overnight. Now they had a little bit of shock because the new group tried to bring somebody back into their group to run the operation. It was Emil. And from what I understand, he spirited out right out from the midst of them, again by extraterrestrials, and they were told this could never happen under any circumstances, that they were ultra secure in their facilities. That shook them up. They all walked out. They are now at point 0. So they walked out a second time. That's right. The information I have, and the government is left holding the bag once more. As far as I'm concerned, continued to hold the bag empty. Psycorps organization is not vicious. They are not vicious people. They are well-trained sensitives and psychics who have a mission. Their basic mission has been, in more recent years, and the original one in the first 5-10 years, where they were used for assassination. But they finally drew the line on this when NSA was formed, and they became part of the NSA in 1949 to 1950. Because their original genesis was in 1940 under Harry Bennett, under the Roosevelt administration. But they said, we will not do assassination anymore because you have other organizations and intelligence groups that can do this much better than we can, so we refuse to do it. But everything else they would still do, and that was basically psychic espionage in this country, outside this country, and anywhere on planet Earth. Obtaining information about anything that the government wanted to know that was not attainable enough through the normal intelligence channels. Or say too many agents got killed or something. Let us say they want us to look at the inside of some secret Russian or Chinese installation or whatever it may be. The psychics could look inside of it and see what they want. They could read books off their desks, reports off a desk, filch them out of a file. They could dematerialize them. Yes, they could. They could start a fire in a filing cabinet a couple thousand miles away if they wanted to do that, or were so instructed. They could plant disinformation also. Theoretically, they could. They could transport small objects. They could had their psychokinetic ability well trained. It was not that they could move large objects, they couldn't, but small objects like a piece of paper or a small package of paper, like they report they could handle, they had a lot of capability. They were also very heavily brainwashed and very heavily, let us say, indoctrinated in the government service, and they were to do, and what they were to do, and indoctrinated to the point that they totally accepted the protocols under which they operated. And this, of course, meant they were loyal to the service, to the government. The only mores and ethics they knew was what the government told them they had, and this was implanted, impregnated, conditioned into them to the point where there's hardly a change. I've only known of two people, I will not go into detail, who decided to walk out and succeeded in doing so. But then they surfaced but when they surfaced, it started the second largest, or the largest manhunt in the history of this country to find those two and bring them back to the government service. Preston saw the police reports, the FBI file reports, because the police can't come into the police came into one of the swap meets, drove right up to the aisle where they're not supposed to be any car, virtually pushed people out of the way, stopped right at Preston's exhibit, and said, "You're friends with so-and-so." Preston says, "What are you talking about?" "You know what I mean." And Preston looked down at the police car's front seat, and there was the FBI dossier and the picture of the individual and the names of both of them they wanted. And if any information is obtained about the whereabouts of these two, I'll not give the names. Report immediately to the FBI office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They never did catch them. They were too smart. They knew what they were doing. They also stole a few pieces of government hardware in the process, including, I might as well say it, the government has alternate reality generators. The portable type a person could carry in a small suitcase, and they can ship themselves and that suitcase with them to an alternate reality, and they cannot be traced. They cannot be found. Kind of park themselves in another, this is a question, kind of park themselves in another before he gets to answer. Yes, park themselves in another universe, so to speak, parallel to our own, very similar to ours, as I've gone into in my lectures. The parallel reality thing. The government has the hardware for this, portable. They've had it for years. I don't know how long. And they've had it and used it to keep out of sight, and they would every so often look in on what was going on to find the police were there, and they'd say, well, they can stay there, we'll stay here. The final outcome was these two people who I knew from years before under circumstances I won't go into, or it might identify them, eventually hitched a ride off the planet and took a shuttle. These shuttles regularly from planet to Alpha Centauri 4, which by agreement is a safe haven for people wanted by the U.S. government. So if you need to get away, you too, if you can find a way, can go to Alpha Centauri 4. That's a joke. Anyway, there's a treaty. It takes about 12 hours to get them. Apparently they took all their family, which meant sisters, brothers, father, mother, whatever, with them. As far as I know, they're still there. Question: who runs the shuttle? Presumably the Alpha Centauri government, but I don't know. It's on a regular basis twice a week. The landing point, I have no idea where it is. Of course they guard it. It's secret. What is their body form like? Alpha Centauri? Like humans, exactly the same. There's a much lower population on their planet. They're not overpopulated. They're an advanced civilization, a little ahead of us, not a great deal, but somewhat ahead of us. They don't like things like the government, head bashing, and that sort of thing. And they want to treat some of the government's agents they no longer have any use for, or whatever, if they are approached, and I don't know how it's done, if they are approached and ask for asylum, if they issue you the card, you just get on the shuttle and that's it. You're there. Beyond that, I don't know. I haven't seen them since. That's a very interesting little side issue, and our government doesn't like it particularly. But there is some sonic kind of treaty, and they honor it. Apparently, there is only one type of treaty with other governments elsewhere. And I gather it is all Earth governments, or includes outside governments, I'm not sure. I have the feeling it includes outside governments too. There's regular communication. I don't know if Preston went into this about the super luminary communication systems that were developed by ITT in the 1960s. It's another one of those little developments that come out of all this business evolving from the Philadelphia experiment and the spin-offs from that and the research done by ITT because they were involved in the background of that program to some extent. They were involved and they were the principal contractor for the Phoenix project. But they also had a lot of other little games also. One of them was building a whole new communication system. This was research based on higher order energies and the effects and the propagation rates, and studied all this and found out. This is all very interesting. With a 6th order energy, we can develop a communication system with a propagation rate C6. That's C to the 6th power. They now have one C8, C to the 8th power. C being the speed of light. C is the speed of light to the 8th power. That's so fast they can literally communicate clear across our galaxy with nothing more than a phase shifter. This is essentially no delay. With the C system, there was a delay, so they went to the 8th power. 50,000 light years across our galaxy, and they can do it in a fraction of a second. So Einstein was wrong in one sense. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light. It can. It's long since been done. It was probably done long since he made the statement. Einstein did relent of some of his statements in earlier years. Before he died, it was not publicly stated that he had. There's a lot more to go here, and we only have a few minutes left. So I thank you for coming to the show tonight. I will not be able to finish the rest of this, but if you hung in there this long, I appreciate it. This was information from Al Bielek. He was an associate of Philip Schneider. All of this has to do with aliens and UFOs and how they have been working with our government. He went back pretty far. I'm going to say from the 50s on, but I believe it went further back than that, according to them. Now, whether I believe it or not is irrelevant. It's up to you. If you believe in UFOs and you trust the source of this information, which is Ted Gunderson, head of the Los Angeles FBI in the late 70s. He's also done work on, he's been on Alex Jones. I believe he's been on William Cooper when he was alive. And he had his own websites. He's done videos. If you've been paying attention to any of this New World Order material, you've heard the name Ted Gunderson. I am on Ted Gunderson's site. I am bringing you information from that site, and it's up to you whether you want to believe it or not. According to Al Bielek, there is time travel. There is psychic, movement of items. You can do it with your mind. I guess they call that, I thought it was called telekinesis, but they did not mention that here. But it is psychic powers that allow people to move objects, small objects, with their mind. So, also mind control, all the things I have mentioned during this talk. We got mind control, UFOs, Montauk Project, trips to Mars, 2-hour underground, what were they called? Time tunnels that would bring you from LA to Long Island in 2 hours. So you could go back and forth during your workday and make it from Long Island to back to LA and back again. Talking about the speed of light and super luminary communication systems, all the above, all this stuff, way, way far out there, way, beyond what a normal human being could probably comprehend. This is some above and beyond, Alpha Centauri government hiding enemies of different governments, and so they wouldn't be punished by these governments because they value life so much that no matter what you did to whatever government, they're going to save you from it and take you on this shuttle and bring you to a planet. Like I said, I'm not, until I see for myself that it isn't true, I won't completely count it out, and I do trust the source of the information. But when you're doing stories like this on UFOs and aliens and how they work with our government and so on, it gets a little hard to believe. But based on the sightings in our own mainstream news of UFOs over the past year or two, based on something happened in Area 51 in Los Alamitos, out in New Mexico. They've got laboratories out there. They're doing things we don't know about, or, most people don't know about, except for these people worked at these places and they came out with the information. So whether you believe it or you don't believe it, people that have worked at these sites are either sending out disinfo. I don't know why you would come out and say this far out stuff just to make yourself look like a nut, if it weren't true. So it may be true that we have visited Mars. We do have contact with aliens. They do help us down here on Earth. Some of them hurt us. Some of them help us. Many diseases that, as we heard from Philip Schneider yesterday, different cancers and AIDS and other diseases were created from extractions from these aliens, because they are poisonous to us, or they can, cause us to be diseased, and so on. So whatever the case may be, it's a conspiracy theory. I am talking about it because I generally trust the source and the creator of this website. That was Ted Gunderson. Now, Ted Gunderson is dead, and he's been dead for over a year now. So who knows who got a hold of this site and threw some wacky stuff on there. So we all have to use our own imaginations, and we all have to use our own, intuition, our own brains, and you got to figure it out for yourself. And what does it mean to all of us? All I can say is, if there are UFOs and they are doing this, sooner or later they're going to reveal themselves, and this will help you prepare for that. You'll say, oh, I remember that wacky story I listened to on Blog Talk Radio with Knucklebones Radio, and I thought, man, that guy's a fruitcake, and then it won't be so overwhelming for you, because you'll go, he told us so, or Ted Gunderson told you so, and I passed it on to you. So do what you want with the information. I'm just trying to kill 2 hours here, 5 days a week, and it's quite a lot. I don't have a team of people here handing me papers for me to bring to you every night. I'm not Alex Jones. I don't have a crew. I pay to do this. It is a hobby. So if you find it funny or whatever you get out of it, if you listened, then I'm okay with it. You're allowed to point and laugh. You're allowed to think it's real. And it really is up to you. I can just lead you to the information. It's up to you what you do with it. So I'll be back tomorrow night, same time, 8 p.m., and I will find some other, I might tone it down a bit. The UFO stuff's overwhelming to me, and I had no idea about this Bielek guy, Al Bielek, Bielek. Look it up for yourself. If this stuff interests you, read it for yourself and decide whether or not you want to buy into it. I don't know what I'm going to bring you tomorrow night. Every day's a new day. Whatever I come across in my travels, I will bring to you. It might be from Ted Gunderson's site again. It might be something you're more familiar with, like HARP or Project Bluebeam or something like that. Maybe you're not familiar with those either, or FEMA or something you heard of. And I'll talk about those things. I've got every day of the week, and I'll bring you the best I can every night. This has been Knucklebones Radio. I am Knucklebones himself. I am signing out. I'll leave.